Lord Krackatoa put out neutral.mp4. This thing went sicko mode on Twitter. Everybody was loving this. A lot of people were like adding me and telling me, you gotta watch this neutral video. Click any frame in this, and it's just Krackatoa giving off menacing energy. But it's based off this. This is the Machabo on fundamentals for those who want to become good at GG. Anti-airs, neutral, mind games, and decision making. Sajam discusses the Machabo article. This is 3 years old now. Krackatoa's video is like a nicer version of it. That's not just like looking at the article. This article is just that good. The ideas are excellent no matter what game you play. And I think the video is a great example about how to take something like this, pages and pages and pages of text, translated into an 8-minute video here. So let's just check it out. We'll watch it. I'm down.
Why'd you get grabbed full screen by Kai Kisuke? Watch this video. Find out.
You know, the energy, the aura.
What you need is simple. Shin Kikoho.
That's correct.
Former Exerd champion and monster Machabo wrote this document, translated by Shinjin Baiken. You can go to Dustloop and read it yourself, but I'm going to summarize it for you.
Wait, it's on Dustloop? That's great too. Dustloop's sick.
In neutral, at any given moment, you are in one of 3 states of play, and they each contest each other, much like a game of rock, paper, scissors.
This is the neutral triangle. No matter what level of play, you will always think about like, ooh, they're being really preemptive, or ooh, they're playing and waiting really passively, or ooh, they're pulling up on me, trying to do something to me. Okay.
All maneuvers, from simply using special moves to whole combinations of movements and buttons, can fit into the context of the triangle. Passive play, reacting and waiting for opportunity.
Passive play has a naturally low amount of risk associated with it. You are waiting for what they're gonna do. They air dash at you, you anti-air with 6 speed. They run up and swing at you, you whiff punish the button that they do. Most players start with this as like a baseline to see what you're bringing to the table, and then they adjust and go one of the other directions depending on what you do.
It's what Faust was doing in this clip.
And that's why this
led
worked.
to his death. Passive play is about waiting and playing reactively. This leaves you available to capitalize on your opponent making preemptive plays. When you're playing passively, anything reactable is punishable. The best part is, you can't be counter hit for doing nothing. But anytime you get counter hit in neutral by a big slow button with a lot of whiff recovery, ask yourself what you could have gotten by doing nothing. Playing passively more often might be your solution.
It's really good against people trying to approach with neutral skip tools. So like any special move that just flies them across the screen. Anything where your opponent is running up and swinging with a big button to try to get things started. Anytime they're trying to use movement to attack with air dashing, passive play is really good to cover that kind of stuff.
Enter establishing play. Good old rock, nothing beats that.
Listen, I'm not here for rock propaganda, okay?
How much ground can your opponent cover before you suddenly realize you're in a shit situation? About this much. When a player is committed to playing passively, they're effectively operating on a delay. A character with a decent run can get into a threatening range from about half screen before you even have time to react. This Faust, me, is reacting to Soul's forward movement as a tell, and trying to check him before he gets a far slash out. When Soul is in this range, that's not enough to check his approach. Soul gets an opportunity to establish his offense, landing far S is good, all because I'm scared of jump-ins, bandit bringers, gun flames, and getting whiff punished.
If you're like, okay, well, how do I beat passive play? It's the most safe. The answer is like, instead of running up and swinging with like some godforsaken starter, huge button that's like very committal, use your movement to get close enough that when you want to attack, you can run and cover distance that's tough for someone to really like check on reaction, and then open with something that's not extremely committal. Almost every character has something like this that you should hit, and if you don't, your character's probably not meant to poke other characters very well.
When you've been playing passively and you believe your opponent is trying to establish themselves with a move like far S, have a plan B on deck. This will involve instantaneous options even faster than 2P. As Faust, crawl takes no time at all. Backdash is instantaneous. 6P reaches upper body invuln in a couple of frames, or maybe just keep blocking. You never know when that approach might be a feint, and blocking far S is pretty good if you have D. Commit to passive play.
This is what you get.
All right. In this example, Faust is playing passively, convinced his opponent might make big reads in neutral, and still convinced that Soul might try something mid-approach, and sadly, gets thrown. He played rock every single time. This little mini game that develops is your reward for choosing establishing play when your opponent is passive. Guilty Gear Neutral can be two players playing very passively. You'll get real impressed when two players stare at each other playing nothing but rock.
Yeah, they do. People love this.
But they can and do approach, and some characters are insanely good at it. So how do we take advantage of establishing play? Paper. Enter scissors. Preemptive play. If you look at the options used to establish oneself in neutral against a passive opponent, you'll find that those options are too limited in their own way. Barring certain matchups, they still need to touch you. They still need to swing with a very specific timing, or they're just whiffing a button in front of your face. You want to stick out something big and active on a read. This could be something like Faust's dive kick or his 5H. Or you can look to crush their option by going over or under, but these preemptive plays are pretty much pure reads. Generally, the normals with the most active frames, or the most invuln, carry the most risk on whiff. It's just how the game is designed. One Faust privilege that comes from his normals being so friggin' long is that he can snipe a forward run before they have a chance to dash block. And at supermax range, he's not that easy to whiff punish either.
For a lot of characters, particularly characters that have long reaching normals, just doing passive play, mostly nothing, waiting for your opponent to do stuff and reacting, and then switching to big old, let me throw out my big, strong, hard to deal with buttons and see what you're gonna do to beat them trying to like approach on you play. That is very good for characters like this. I would say 90% of the time in neutral, Faust can like play those two styles. He doesn't really need to be the one establishing. His archetype doesn't really need to do that. And some matchups, sure, he has to do it because his normal game plan doesn't work.
It's a decent way to challenge approach before this happens. So we have our triangle: passive play, establishing play, preemptive play. What if we tie? Rock versus rock. It's literally this until it isn't. Paper versus paper. The character that can swing faster first here wins. It's Ramlethal.
Yep.
Read versus read. When you clash with preemptive options, the victor is the one with the better hitbox. You'll find in a lot of matchups, some moves naturally do well against others because of how the invuln lines up, how the hitboxes are drawn, or maybe just how disjointed the move is. 6Ps go under all sorts of buttons pressed at range, as do moves like Stun Dipper, Night Raid Vortex, or even May 3K. Jump-ins and air dashes do well against long, dominant, preemptive normals and specials. If you see or suspect that your opponent is doing a lot of options that die outright to 6P, be mindful of the triangle, but introduce a lot more 6P into your play until they adjust. Newer players often struggle to adjust. Stronger players adjust immediately, or they might actually adjust before you even throw that 6P. A Soul player might be doing some of these, and some of these, just to set up one of those. After all, you were doing a lot of far S. Night Raid beats both, and your opponent is playing the exact same game you are. Crack, isn't this a lot? It is, and I didn't even get into risk reward or how character matchups play into stuff. There's going to be a lot of variables in neutral that you're going to struggle to grapple with while you try to refine your gameplay. Having some kind of structure to break down a situation and look at how reactions and adjustment play into decision making is a muscle you want to start exercising as soon as possible.
You're not gonna get it all right away if you're like, okay, he did a move and I don't even know if that shit was isosceles or what. I don't even know what's going on. It gives you a point of focus. It gives you a place to come back to. What was my opponent doing? They were standing there hitting buttons. Okay, if they're standing there hitting buttons, which part of the triangle is that? They're being preemptive. Okay, how do I beat people who are being preemptive? Got it. You can even think about it like, what are your character's options that fit each of the triangle? I have like my far slash, it's really far, it's good for being preemptive. I've got my 5K, it's like a long reaching poke. I got my 6P, it's good. These are all good preemptive things. My passive option is walk back anti-air 6P. My passive option to whip punish is walk back 2H or something, right? Like, okay, these are my whip punish, like waiting options. Then you think like, what are my aggressive options like dash up far slash, dash up 5P? These are my options if I want to establish and run up and be that dude.
Let me make things clear. This video is no replacement for finding and fighting strong opponents. Now go, play some Guilty Gear, and have a good new year.
Let's take a character in Strive and just think about it through their lens, right? Let's think about Baiken. When Baiken's being passive, she anti-airs with 6P if her opponent's like air dashing at her, or if they're running in and swinging with the button, she whip punishes with like her 2H or far slash. What does she do preemptively to put stuff on the screen to deal with her opponent attacking her? Very easy. She swings a 2H or far slash counter hit. and you die. Air dash back to Tommy even. It kind of fits both, but it's good for that too. What's her establishing play? It's like fucking everything. Air dash jump S, Yozansen. This is her attacking you, establishing her offense. Run up, far slash is also very good. Run up 2H is also a really common one. Run up Kabari. It can be preemptive, but it can also be to establish your offense too. So what do you do if your opponent is sitting there waiting? You establish your offense. You run at them and you do your far slash, which is hard to contest. They have to commit to 6P. You run at them and do your 2H. That beats 6P in those kinds of books. You run at them and do 5P or 5K Yozansen or whatever, right? You run at them and do air dash late and then they're not ready. So then your opponent, instead of passively waiting, they start trying to swing at Baiken to catch it. They run up and they 6P early. They run up and they far slash to beat you. They run up and they... So when they start doing that, you're like, okay, I can't establish anymore. I have to now go up here and passively wait. And what can she do to passively wait? She can walk back, let you whiff, 2H whiff punish. You can walk back, Kabari your buttons that you're swinging at them. You can walk back and just let them whiff and then air dash and then take advantage of the recovery. Whereas jumping up or up back depends on what you're jumping for. If you're jumping to then air dash in, establishing play, right? If you're jumping backwards to like beat your opponent running up and swinging at you, then it's passive play. If you're doing like jump neutral button that like checks space in front of you, then it's probably you being preemptive. If you pull up any clip of a fighting game, you can probably figure out which part of the triangle they're doing just by watching it. How does this work with characters with more pronounced strengths like Axel zoning? So I talked about this in regards to Faust, a character who really only needs to do 2 parts of the triangle in neutral, and Axel is very similar. He just does passive and preemptive play for the most part because you don't need to establish. Sitting there and waiting for them to do stuff or sitting there and sticking out your good pokes that go full screen, those are like very effective. And if you have 2 options, then you're covered. At worst, you're even with your opponent, but like you're always going to be fine. Problems for those characters are generally matchups where they cannot do this style of play because the other character prevents them from doing it. So they have to establish, and establishing is not their specialty. Testament and Axel and Faust only really want to establish offense if they're already winning the video game. When you get to a high level and you get better at the character, you can also establish more effectively. But some archetypes naturally do less of one of these options. Ino doesn't really do passive much. It's just not her archetype really. And if the video to you, you're like kind of sort of figuring it out, but you're not 100% there, you can always do one of 2 things. You can either read the article or watch my video on it, or you can just watch a match and think like, who's doing what here? And like you yourself, when you fight someone, you want to think, what's my opponent doing? If they're trying to do one of these things, the answer is right here on the screen. Listen. Thank God TFT players don't have to study new languages to win games. You guys are freaks. That's not true at all. I watch my friend play TFT. I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about. He's like, I'm donkey rolling like this. I'm leveling on 6. It's a fast 8 into a top 4 into a back 9 on the green. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck this guy is talking about. I played some TFT and I'm like, dude, this guy is just making shit up.